Hello and welcome to the AI Digest. I'm your host, Joaquin Melara, and with me today is Tane Piper, software engineering leader from Inter IKEA Systems. Tane, so you originally came from Scotland and now you're living in the Netherlands. Is that true?
Yeah, okay, thank you very much for having me on. Yeah, that's correct. I moved here about 7 years ago, and a couple of years ago I joined IKEA, Inter IKEA Systems, and yeah, I've been there for the last couple of years working as a digital technology leader, just a kind of tech lead role at first, but now I'm a software engineering leader in our digital capabilities area for a retail concept.
How's the change in weather treating you?
It's been very, very wet here. Um, this last few days, it's just rained. Yesterday and the day before, it was a little bit nicer, but yeah, it's been pretty much yeah, monsoon weather.
Has there been a culture shock in going from Scotland to the Netherlands?
Not quite so much for me. I actually have family here through marriage, but I've been here, coming here for quite a few years, so it wasn't such a culture shock. But the language is not the easiest to learn.
So you have loads of experience developing software hands-on, and you built a long-standing career also contributing in the open source world. Are there any notable achievements you'd like to share or that you can recall? I think you mentioned you started coding at 4 years old or something very young.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my kind of first memory of it is when we had BBC Micros at school, and this was primary one. So very early age, we were kind of being shown how to do our program. So I mean, whether you could say it's my first program or not, it's questionable. But it was kind of the first introduction to telling a computer to do something. And I mean, that's pretty much been my career, career ever since. Especially now with the GPTs in the last few days, kind of playing with that. Um, but I mean, over the years, I've tried to release a lot of things open source. I mean, there's some things from earlier days that are still out there, but as things change on the internet, it's kind of got a little bit lost. But on my GitHub, I've got quite a few things, and I've released a number of libraries and uh, tools and things that are out there. Like there's a bunch of RxJS functions that I released. There's about 130 of them for doing things with all your kind of primitives. And then there's a form library that takes any form, turns it into a dynamic form, so you can kind of get the values and play with it. And then also, yeah, playing a lot of stuff with Docker and Node. I was a very early adopter of Node. Um, I was I still have slides online where I'm linking to npm when it was still on Git. Like this was before npm was even a thing on Node. I was using it. So been doing a lot of stuff early on with this, and even with the semantic web quite early on. Some early stuff in 2006 were in micro format. So there it was. I was doing stuff early, but then I kind of got into a career where I was doing a lot of kind of not always bog standard stuff. I mean, I had some nice experimental stuff in between, but it was typically building systems for organizations based on kind of specs and things. Um, but I think in the last few years, I've become more in the tech leadership area, doing less and less programming these days, although still getting time to do some programming, which is nice. Um, and really getting a bit of a bringing a bit of a culture change as well, and into IKEA a little bit with working in the open, and bringing that kind of culture into where we are. So I mean, yeah, for people who don't know, IKEA is a franchise system, and Inter IKEA is the part of the system that owns the IKEA concept. So actually owns the range, which is the making the furniture, well, sorry, the designing the furniture and accessories and home and all the home furnishing knowledge, supply, who deal with all their suppliers, deal with logistics and the supply chain there, and then retail concept where I work. So we develop the retail concept, the thing you experience when you go into shop or you go online or any kind of touch point you're interacting with us. That's where our work comes in. So we work there, and then there's the retailers that most customers interact with across the markets.
I think that's an excellent segue into what we're going to be discussing today.
Hmm.
Initially, we threw out some drafts and we were talking about process and sustainability, but
Hmm.
towards the end of it, you made mention that I, you yourself are working towards learning more about and applying AI governance principles as it
Hmm.
relates to process and sustainability efforts in the company,
Yeah,
especially given that it's such a large, complex, multinational organization. So
hmm,
I cannot even begin to imagine all the little pieces, intricacies of each part of the system.
absolutely. And I mean, it also suggests there's so many use cases, which means, being in such a big business, you can't focus on all the use cases because you have to focus on your vertical slice of the business. Um, but I think what we've tried to do is, first of all, get a group together who we know are interested in this area, get regular meetings set up, do talks, do demos. My presentation a couple of months ago was around this, around the governance and looking at how we should uh, do AI at IKEA in terms of making sure that it's safe and cost effective, sustainable, um, all of these kind of things that go in line with a lot of us being kind of values based business in that way that we have to meet our values. So we can't go ahead and just spend lots of money, set up lots of infrastructure, burn lots of energy to just test these things and play with them. It has to be done in a kind of pragmatic way. So across those areas, we talk to each other, and we're looking at how do we set those standards where we all agree the same kind of code of ethics and standards and just ways of doing things, and work towards having more of a shared foundational base than a separated one.
Now, I'd like to take a step back and kind of ground. Oh, pardon me. I'd like to take a step back and kind of ground the context of this conversation because
Hmm.
it's supposed to be the AI digest, and we're going to break things down in a more concrete way where people that are technical or not technical they can get a just a minute picture on how vast this system is. So
Hmm.
IKEA is based out of how many countries or currently?
Oh, I had this number the other day. We have 63 markets. So we have
63?
63 markets. We have basically a store on every continent now except Antarctica, I think. So 486 stores, and that's the big
How
stores.
how many languages do you reckon you have to
Oh,
interface with?
when I know when I joined, we were at least at 50 languages, but probably more now.
And each store, do they have their own sort of a globally local aesthetic or presentation? They have to
Absolutely. I
have,
mean that
yeah.
that I mean that's the thing is you go into an IKEA in New York, or you go into an IKEA in Paris, or you go into IKEA in Sweden or in India. They all have the IKEA experience. You walk in, they have the same.
The bones, the
We're
framework, right?
exactly, we're a sales company, so we have sales techniques that we have that are familiar to people across the world. You know what to expect, but absolutely in the local context, then there's you know you can think of countries and big continents where the climate is different, from the east to west side of the continent, and because of that, the certain materials or furnitures don't necessarily work, or so you have to have that and have that cultural context as well. That's the nature of being a global business, is absolutely working, thinking globally but acting locally in that sense.
So that's just right now we're just painting the retail perspective, but this doesn't take into consideration the design, fabrication, and sourcing of materials, shipping from one point to the other. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that in itself is another world of complexity, right?
and that's the area that is I don't understand because it's not my side of the business, but you're aware of it, but in terms of, like you say, it's a complex bubble. So just look at the bubble, not the inside of it, basically. Yeah.
So in the context that you work, you said you were focused on digital capabilities, making content modular. I imagine,
Mhm.
you're modularizing content so that it's reusable across a
Mhm.
multitude of channels.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
And
these things have names these days, like Mach frame stacks and things like that. But for me, it is. I mean, we met at uh, the the Knowledge Graph conference. So I've been to a few Knowledge Graph things now. So which one did we? It was Knowledge Graph conference in New York, and I mean, there that was really seeing what other people are doing with knowledge graphs and getting a grasp of it, because I didn't come from a knowledge graph background. I came from a software engineering background. Although I joined the knowledge graph team at IKEA specifically when I first joined, and that allowed me to see, yeah, what we can really do with this in terms of things like having centralized vocabularies and delivering those as taxonomies to services, having the ontologies that define the rules of the reality of your system. Like what connects to what and what can exist in that uh, world, basically. And
so,
then
it's
using that, now we can take that forward to the content side to drive that the business rules within the content, for example.
I think you've illustrated two very important aspects of the work that you're doing now that may be a bit
Mhm.
foreign to somebody who was in your shoes when you started working in the knowledge graph team. You
Mhm.
mentioned taxonomies, basically knowledge management systems, and
Yeah.
the intercomponents that go inside of that house. And then
Mhm.
you mentioned content. Is there something you'd like
Mhm.
to, like? How would you explain it to yourself if you were starting
Mhm.
at IKEA today?
Well, I mean, taxonomies is just words. So for us, a lot of it it's business glossary, for example. It's
Mhm.
we're
Terminologies
very.
that are commonly used across the
I
business?
mean, in home furnishing, I mean, red is red, wood is wood. It's not that there's no sort of extra magic to it that you need to describe. But yeah, sometimes when you get to maybe more of the specific things, they're a business context things. So, they have a very particular meaning in the environment that you're in. Um, but outside of that, then you try to use, yeah, as general as possible that people can understand. I think talking about knowledge graphs is difficult. Visualizing and showing people what you can do with it, with especially with the right tool, can be very good. And also working with people in visual tools like Miro, for example, a tool that's not an ontology tool, but allows you to kind of have the concept of the connections and things that you have in there. Um, and what that then leads to is probably another topic, which is the governance, really, because this is really what this is. This is basically setting the rules to say, you know, this is, the structure of a business, or this is the structure of a software domain, or, a asset domain, for example. For us, when we have photos, they have a lot of properties that are for photos, but they also have IKEA properties. Like photos are room settings, for example. So we'll have additional properties that go with those. But those rooms, you want one instance of it, so it's reusable across your business, to say anything that's tagged with, say, this identifier that says living room is now findable by that tag as well. So now with content, what you have is, we are a business built on people, so people is about learning,
Mhm.
and developing people. So building content for learning and connecting it to the parts of the business means that we can deliver more relevant content to the co-workers. So, based on your role, whether you're a store worker or a digital co-worker, you can now find that information a lot easier. Um, but the point is not to hide the other content, because in a business like mine, I think I've said this a couple of times now, which is, this is the first time I've never really been able to fully describe my role as just actually a software engineering leader. Most of
Hmm.
my job now is connections. It's connecting people. It's talking to people. It's being involved in different projects or initiatives within a certain boundary of that. So I'm not involved in, the other kind of parts of the business, but just talking around this kind of digital enablement.
So if I may tie it back to the physical realm, there's a
Hmm.
store out of the 480 stores plus that exist in the world, and that store has subdivisions that are focused on particular rooms of a house. There's
Hmm.
kitchens, bedrooms, bathrooms, etc., and that serves to be a sort of a house or a category area, right? For
Yeah,
your cataloging
absolutely.
system. And then underneath
Yeah.
that are all the products that have to do with the usage of that kind of room, right? Like bedroom has lamps and beds and
Hmm.
wardrobes and dressers and bed nightstands. Um,
Absolutely.
so your
Yeah. So.
job is to sort of tie in the things that you would attribute to that physical object and tie it
Mhm.
back into the room, tie it back into the store, and help kind of export that human context to a system that
Mhm.
communicates across all these different retail locations. Is that it?
Absolutely. I mean, when you talk about a product being developed, we have our range. Within that, we have our product categories and that sit in those range. So, like you say, um, the bedroom or the kitchen or whatever, and then you have all the accessories. But those things they're home furnishing, but sometimes, like a Kallax, for example, can be used in a lot of rooms. It can be used in a lot of context. You could use it in a kitchen, you could use it in a study room, in a bathroom, it doesn't matter. So there's very universal products across that. And then it's learning how to coordinate that. And that's a very human thing because that is home furnishing knowledge, but that's also what you need to get to the customer as well. So in a digital way, that's yeah, a big part of what we're doing is bringing that to enable tools that can help. But I think one key thing that we do see is this is not a replacement for a human being because
Mm,
it's about for a co-worker in the moment of need finding the information because they have a customer asking them a question versus a customer on the website who's just in that moment there who needs that information as they're and they might not necessarily know what they're looking for. So there you're looking at personalization, recommendation, all of these things that you can deliver. um, but one key thing, and was part of a demo that we built a few months ago, and I also just recently demoed again in Brussels, which was around using a knowledge graph as a way to drive recommendations. We actually built it as a Chrome extension, so it's on IKEA.com, like on my browser. It's not in the real IKEA.com, but it's a real experience in that sense. The UI wasn't very fancy. It was built in 3 days. Most of the work was done in the knowledge graph, but it allowed us to show by going with strong signals and going with the customer and asking them questions, we can give better recommendations. Um, of course, it can now be interfaced with a chat interface versus a set of drop downs or set of buttons or something like that. So we can go from a UI to a conversational way of doing that. And going back to a point you made earlier, which is structuring the content. Yes, a lot of it is either structuring content for the sake of we have something like say a description of what an IKEA store is, like the ontological description of it, and we might have some extra content that goes with that. So we describe the big blue box that we call it. Um, that can then be used in training material. It can then be used in other locations. Um, but then we have a lot of unstructured content that we don't know yet how to necessarily use or is there. But I think what the other side of machine learning side of things is to use that to point an API at a SharePoint folder full of PDFs, process all the PDFs, and for each one, create a summary and get the semantic tags. and put that in a location that you can store it and query it. So now you have a content landscape as
I
well.
I think you made mention to two interesting things that I'd like to kind of open up a little bit more. You know, earlier on before we started the recording, we talked about learning analytics, and I think as you've been talking about the usage of this knowledge and storing it in a system that could be retrieved for anybody, mainly the internal employees. This these learning analytics, this learning data can be used for both the customer and the internal employees as well, right? You want to make it easy for them to communicate against
Mhm.
the schema of knowledge in the store.
Well,
Isn't
I
that
mean,
it?
the analytics are not for the customer. I mean, the analytics are for, say, the people who are driving the learning, who are managing the learning, and
So
doing
what is
that
that
kind of
used
stuff.
for? I must have misunderstood the
But
thing.
so understanding how our people are doing in the business. Are we, are we doing right by them to enable them to do their job, make sure they're getting the right training. So when it comes, I mean, when we talk about analytics, there's so many different types of analytics out there. It's more about the metrics. It's like it's coming from like a learning management system, and then you can see, in the month of November, 53% of people interacted with the learning, so you want to get that number up. You can start actually building some KPIs and understanding around, the learning system.
So how does
So
that work? Do I sign up to work at IKEA as a cashier,
mhm,
or I work on the floor to help point customers to something that they might be looking for? Do I
mhm.
have some sort of onboarding? And based on that onboarding,
Yeah,
I there's analytics that is being collected to showcase my performance or showcase that I fulfilled some knowledge check. Is
I
that
would
what
say
it is?
it's not as, I mean, it's when we talk about collected, I mean, this is more, I mean, we have systems where basically, yeah, you log in and we know that you've done your courses. These are kind of standard systems across a lot of businesses where you do this kind of computer-based training, but there are
Mhm.
also physical trainings that get recorded in these systems. So yeah, I mean, at IKEA, you are onboarding into a company that has values, that has a very specific way of doing things. So yeah, you have to learn those to do your role,
Right.
as an IKEA employee. I think that's, I'm a software engineering leader, but I'm also an IKEA employee. So when we do things, we are looking at it from cost conscious perspective, sustainability perspective, customer focused. How do we do the right thing rather than just, yeah, run ahead, spend a lot of money and energy and build something that is not sustainable in the long term. And like a lot of, you know big projects and big companies and lots of enterprises, there'll be projects that go nowhere. So with AI and the machine learning side, it's such a big investment up front that you have to be very careful with it, I think.
So I appreciate that you guys are piecemealing the breakdown of learning and applying, learning and applying, learning and applying. As you mentioned, it's
Mhm.
not a cheap process or a cheap initiative to kind of invest your time, energy,
But it's
resources.
also it's also the same for people. I mean, when you hire somebody and onboard them, you're investing in them. So
Mm,
if they leave 6 months to a year later because they're not getting the right learning and they can't do their job and they're getting frustrated, then that's also a waste of money. So,
mm.
but similarly, if you've got people who've been there for 10 years, they have a lot of knowledge in the business. You want to continue to grow their knowledge. There are definitely, IKEA is a business, but there's definitely people who started selling hot dogs who are now, managers in different areas of the business. So you can really grow into a role like that. But the right learning has to be there for somebody to be able to do that.
Mm.
And just to tie it back, I mean, part of the reason we talked about it is, yeah, I mean, going back to the knowledge graph, is again having those single taxonomies allows us to have that visibility of connecting the learning to the content to the knowledge, so we can see that um, we have the right information to do the training, and also that we're getting the right feedback from the co-workers that the training is good enough, basically, or that the training exists.
And you've mentioned taxonomies, you've mentioned ontologies, you've mentioned all these other ways of
Big
tracking and tying
buzzwords.
information together. Yeah, big words that are kind of esoteric in meaning to the general population, but that's sort of the foundational layer that helps you build a map of what exists as far as
Hmm.
domain knowledge in all these different areas, and helps
Hmm.
you kind of visualize how the business works in from a
Hmm.
technical standpoint, right? Um,
Well, from, not just from a technical standpoint, I think it's actually from a it's from many standpoints. I mean, it depends on the domain of the part that you're doing. I mean, for us, we have very socio-economic things in there. We have a lot of stuff around sustainability. I mean, what an on like if we try to break it down as simple as possible in some sense, an ontology is defining your reality. Is saying these rules are what can and can't happen in a domain. So, if you think of a domain like engine parts, for example, and you want to trace them, you want to make sure that if a part has a certain tolerance or something that when it's tested it doesn't crack, you can have those rules in your knowledge graph, for example, so they can be tied to it. So when you're going into an engine, you don't have to search for the parts. It already lists all the parts. Basically, it's all connected there, and you get this very nice kind of graph from it. So with us, I mean, it's around, you a bed is a product, and there's different types of bed. There's indoor beds, there's sofa beds. Sofa beds enable sleep, so it's like, what can products enable in those? And then from sleep you have add-ons for, so like cushions and mattresses and all these things. So it allows you to go through and see the structure of a business, basically, or a domain.
does that tie back into the manufacturing and the supply chain of it, or are there clusters of knowledge being kind of built?
I think in a business like ours, it's maybe more towards clusters, like, because we have these very defined verticals. We're not
Hmm.
uh, we're not building the same systems,
Hmm.
because we're building for our business to business customer, essentially, in our area. I mean, most of it is business to business in our area, if you think of it that way. Maybe except the range in some ways, we're designing it for the customer. So, that's the purpose of it. But um, but in that, yeah, we have to have interoperability. So, I mean, one area would be, there's a standard called GS1, which is a barcode standard. And that barcode can now track a product all the way from uh, material, like as it comes in, the barcodes can be included with it, out to the product at the end. So it's about traceability in the system. But that product at the end has that barcode, and now customers can scan it and get the manual online as a
Wow.
PDF or something. So it's the same. So it's like that kind of level of stuff we do need to get to. Like, we have that whole kind of value chain understanding in the system. But yeah, we have different needs, different cadences at the moment. I think it's more about talking with each other, finding the commonalities, and making sure we kind of bring those together. But in terms of digitization, this is the a kind of new wave of digitization. I think knowledge graphs are finally getting their time and picking up, and just at the same time as LLMs have come along, it's like a really kind of perfect combination for a lot of these systems.
I think it makes sense from the standpoint that your clusters of knowledge because I mean you said it was a pragmatic company and you guys do what works, and what works is to do and implement new technologies and try things in use cases in isolated areas, and then you slowly
Mhm.
extend in concentric circles, right? That's the whole attitude of the company: do what works,
Mhm.
don't kind of kick a can down the road and spend money
I
that you don't
mean,
need to.
that's the thing. If a store in, um, say, Australia had to make a decision and send it back to Sweden every time to get an okay, then things would just be too slow. So I mean, they have to be able to make decisions there and then. like a pallet didn't come in with some expected stock. Okay, we now need to think of a different add-on for putting there because we don't have enough in stock to sell. So that decision has to happen there and then. It can't be, an asynchronous decision to another location. But then there are other decisions that have to come top down for the business, and that's the ones where I think if they're delivered through services that can deliver the content in the right way, so we get away from PowerPoints and PDFs being sent around, and you know things that are not like accountability is not. I'm not trying to put it in sense of like you must do something in that way, but it's more we know that the content's getting pushed out and being read in the relevant places, essentially.
Hmm. So let's go back to the topic of sustainability and how that's a
Mm-hmm.
driving force for IKEA and one of the core values that you guys would like to exemplify in everything that you do.
Mm-hmm.
How are you guys abiding by all the new ESG regulatory compliance laws that are coming out that you have to kind of exemplify where you're sourcing your materials, what kind of suppliers are giving you the things, are they compliant with the
Mm-hmm.
anti-slavery laws? Like, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
just learning about all that stuff, but it's just such a complex web of things that you have to abide by.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, we have definitely our own code of conduct. Sorry, iWay. It's you can read about it on our website, where I think we've always been a bit ahead of sometimes the legislation in this. As far as I understand, when you look at the history, we've always tried to be very fair in how we deal with suppliers, um, and I think push towards having traceability at the heart of products, materials, and with sustainability. I mean, we're already going into circular economy, a second-hand market of products where if you have a second-hand product, it's more about refreshing that product. Um, I think it's no secret IKEA is a big brand, and brands like to have people have their brand stuff. So I mean, even if you pick up a second-hand piece somewhere, it's still an IKEA piece. It's that we're still in that sense responsible for it. So if you need some spare parts for it, I think rather than throwing it out, um, repair it and have it as a loved piece in the house that's somebody's repaired. The second-hand IKEA effect maybe.
Do you
It could
guys
be a new thing.
are there initiatives as well for if you have something that you're no longer using, you can kind of
Exactly.
donate it back or get a discount, and then you kind of just turn that into something else. You recycle it or you grind it down and build something else out
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah. I mean, in the store, so when you're not a retail co-worker, you can do these things at IKEA called front days or front weeks, where you actually go in the store and you're down there, and I'm answering customers' questions on the floor. I'm trying my Dutch as best as I can. But yeah, you're really there. You're doing it, and you get to see the whole store. And we have like recovery areas, so we can recover materials and spare parts and bits. If a product gets broken, um, or there's missing parts, they try the best to basically put that together and sell that instead of having to do it. I mean, I know you can read on Reddit all day people complaining about things at IKEA, but I think there's you'll always have things that don't work on a day, or something in the system. And when I mean system, is in the
Nothing's
overall
perfect. Nothing's
system.
perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nothing's perfect. And I think that can sometimes come down to training as well. If maybe a coworker doesn't know something, so if we make the training better, then we can make that better. But I think overall in terms of sustainability, I mean, IKEA is rooted in nature. I mean, all our products come from nature, so we have to, I think, have a very good relationship with nature. And be moving towards zero carbon and being part of the solution, not the problem. You know, we're a big company, retail company. We
You have
no
a big
secret, we have
impact
to
in the
make
world.
we have
Yeah.
we have to make money to survive as a business. But we also are dealing with people's homes, and I think that's the thing, is that this is something people need, you know um, and the more people buy stuff, the lower the prices go down because the volume goes up. It's simple. That's the simple economics part of it. But in a modern world, that whole supply chain is broken compared to how it was 10 years ago. So we have to think of new models and new ways of working and improving the whole value chain. And that includes the digital side as well, the whole digitization.
So let's go back to that, and let's talk a little bit more about how, you know, the parts that you're championing as a engineering leader.
Mhm.
What are you working on nowadays?
So my main part is modular content. I'm working on, I guess, content strategy, or at least part of it. I mean, content strategy is bigger than just one team and one part. But we are looking at it being an enablement team, working with the knowledge graph. So I'm also a champion for the knowledge graph. Whenever I can kind of talk about it and champion them, and see opportunities for them, I'm kind of reaching out to help with them. Um, but yeah, just AI and the AI governance and thinking about it. Um, from my presentation, it was my experiences. Last year, or earlier this year, I wrote stochastic parrot. So it's stochasticparrot.lol is the domain. And what I found out was you just gave GPT an empty prompt and it returned something. At first, I thought it was a privacy thing because it was returning answers to questions I wasn't asking it. But it turns out it's just hallucinating. So from that, I learned, oh, these things can be dangerous,
Mm.
unless you're giving them very factual information. So I think once I learned that, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cough just a second.
It's fine.
It always happens when with these things. Um, but yeah, I just saw that we have to have a very pragmatic way of going forward with this, where we focus on what we want to build for
Mhm.
IKEA, which is a home furnishing knowledge system or recommendation system.
That's the business.
The
You
Yeah,
need to amplify the business capabilities.
absolutely. These things should not be making up Seinfeld scripts or answering questions about philosophy or religion or doing whatever. It's like, this is the purpose of the thing. So you don't need a huge foundational model for that. You just need something that understands conversation, and then you load something onto that. And my kind of dream for the future is to have something a bit like Docker, where you're just adding the layers of knowledge on top a little bit at a time, and that foundational image grows over time, that you can build your other systems off, so that it doesn't cost millions to do this stuff. You maybe spend 500,000 doing your first big model,
Mhm.
and then everything after that is just incremental, hopefully. So I think that's where we want to go to, and that we can have attribution and trust in the model. Because you're right, legislation is coming. We're in the EU. We're global, but we're mostly an EU company in that sense. So we are under GDPR, we're under Digital Services Act, EU AI Act. But in any market that's bringing an act forward, yeah, we have to be thinking about what do we do to meet that. And I think different acts work in different ways. I think you know America tends to favor self-regulation and reporting, whereas in the EU it tends to be more, the consumer. This is what it is for the consumer, and you have to build towards it. So I think it's a different balance in both, but I think we have to work towards maybe more the EU way, and yeah, really think about what it is we're putting out there.
That's one of the challenges with a multinational organization, that you have a toe or you have a tentacle in every one of these territories, and they all have their own ruling system against how do you use data, how do you interact with customers, what's
Mhm.
allowed and what's not allowed, and you have to be very careful not to land in hot water for one or more of those
Mhm.
territories.
But
Um,
I think it's what the thing that's a challenge for IKEA
mhm,
is Inter IKEA only operates in two countries, Sweden and the Netherlands, and that's it. So that's where our bases are. The rest of it is our franchise system. So we're having to trust our franchisees to do the
mhm.
right thing as well. But I think this is also where the responsibility and the I guess you could say the power we do have here is that we kind of say you should not definitely not do this, and you should maybe use these foundational models, or um, you know when you're building infrastructure or looking at infrastructure, can we look at some like shared infrastructure there where we have to have some tenancy, but maybe we can, yeah, look at keeping the costs low.
What about the design of things? Have you guys considered using maybe generative AI, consuming 3D models and spitting out, uh, you know,
Oh,
this?
it's coming. I mean, you know, I, I think it's not unexpected. It's coming, but obviously
Mhm.
I can't show you. But yeah, I've seen something. Oops, going a bit blurry here. There we go. I mean, we're definitely have people looking into that. Unfortunately, I was just not involved in the one with 3D models, but I've seen it work, and yeah, I mean, it has an idea of your room and can, based on suggestions, come up with some stuff. So I think, you know, soon enough you'll see that from us. But again, when we know it can be done in a ethical
Consistently,
and
yeah.
consistent and sustainable way.
Mm. So how does
Because now,
technology?
because I was just thinking there. I mean, if we're doing models, it's not just the text and the images, but we're having to send also the models, and yeah, that could, it's also data you're sending over the network. I mean, people forget how costly that is. I'm trying myself to personally reduce the amount of emails I have, the amount of things I have running, because and even the things I store, because in the end, it's all adding up. It all costs not only money but energy.
So how in the tech space are you enabling that process of AI governance? How are you contributing to that, to the development of a ruling system within this group that you're in?
I think we're taking like again an approach where it's almost like a foundation. I kind of suggested, and I think maybe we try something like that. I mean, we're still kind of figuring things out, I guess. But people can kind of nominate to say, I'll take on this bit of a role to maybe look at a certain area, or look at certain kind of experimentation, or stuff that we can look at. But I think the outcome of the next few months is really where we're going to start seeing the groundwork of, a IKEA wide agreement on AI, or at least I hope to see that, because I think, yeah, and we have to, be open about it. That's the thing, is actually you can't be secretive about this, because the AI has to be explainable. Therefore, you also have to explain what you're doing with AI. The explainability goes many levels, in this. So yeah, I think we will see something in that space soon, and it will always be cost conscious, sustainable, people and planet positive, and thinking about the customer.
How do you codify these processes of you have an initiative, you incorporate
Hmm.
some new technology, and you have to kind of pitch it to the business to get approval, gain budget, and deploy some resources, get one or two employees, play with the technology. How do you codify the development of these new initiatives?
Do you know, that's a great question, because I don't think I've figured out the answer yet. But I certainly, since being at IKEA, some of the projects I've worked on, what we've done is, for example, either done, say, 12 weeks, built a POC and actually shipped it to production. So we learned an end-to-end process. I think that's something that's been quite good, because when you have something to show that's not just code or some Postman endpoint or some very basic demo, but is actually like an end product, that's when I think it's maybe comes from maybe a mindset from the furniture side. If you show a table leg, it's not very interesting. If you show the whole table, then you've got something to sell. So I think, yeah, we do try this kind of end-to-end process. The team I've been leading, actually, will be a year in January. We started just a few people, and we just like figured some stuff out, and found a name and started finding a mission and a goal and what we could actually do and what we shouldn't do. Because when you when you start a project, like I say, a headless CMS, it's like, okay, are we a content type team? Okay, we can't be a content type team because we'll be a bottleneck. So you have to make a very, are we building a CMS? No, we're not building a CMS. So it's, those kind of questions come along. I think if we can codify it, I'll write a book on it, because it's an interesting process of like really taking an idea, and unfortunately, this is not a process that is available in every organization or environment. I know there's a lot of environments where you're just dealing with legacy systems and nobody's interested in building new stuff. But I think here we have a bit of a spirit of experimentation, and we know we have to look at this to keep up with the world in terms of the digitization and online. So yeah, I think it's more about having an end product that you can show, I think, that proves some of the questions. So in the end, our question was, can we connect a knowledge graph to a headless CMS and make it work as both a way to make content semantically rich and also as a data source? So, if you have a label in a knowledge graph, that label is now the same label everywhere. And if it changes, you only change it in one place. You don't have to change it in the content management system. It's just because it's already connected. So I think, we proved the point. That's possible. We can do that. And now it's like, how do we actually productionize it, make it a platform, make it an enablement tool for different teams? And I think, that's where in a business, now we've done that, we can now go to the stakeholders and teams who have pain points and actually talk to them and show them something. So I think, there's a whole process there, which also involves domain modeling, like maybe working with a knowledge graph team to understand, do you need these taxonomies? And like, taxonomies are just words. They're just your business glossary or your things that you need to connect things to. Pick a well-known brand that we can easily, like a car brand or something, like Ford, then, they're a subclass of car company, and they have all these ranges, and in that they have all these cars. You have your Ford Focus, your Ford Escort, your Ford, what's the truck in America?
Sure, for Tacoma or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, and some Ford is one where you have products that are not in regions, because different regions have different needs.
Right? Yeah.
So
I think
so you could think of that as like you're writing content now about that car, so you want to connect that content.
I think you indirectly answered my question, in that you don't know how to codify it, but there are some guidelines as to what kind of directs or helps you navigate the thinking process behind adding value as your own separate unit. It's kind of like your own startup or a research and development arm of the company.
A little bit, but it is about productizing. It can't always be about research and development. We have to have, in the end, something that is delivering
tangible.
value.
Yeah. So can we dive a little bit deeper into that guiding process that you were kind of illustrating on how do you kind of shape your own identity within an organization to add value and not kind of stray too far away from what the actual bottom line is? Because I think that's a really interesting concept there.
Mm. I mean, I think it is one of these things where, like I said, this is a very difficult role for me to describe as a software engineering leader, because most of my day is not writing code, it's not doing code reviews, it's not sitting doing tech specs, it's connecting with people and trying to learn how to talk to people at their level, in the sense of most people don't want to hear about Kubernetes or Azure or Terraform or any of these things. That's for a certain technical audience that you're delivering to. What they want to hear is this going to make my job easier? Is it going to make my team deliver more with less effort? Because that's really what business users are looking for. So yes,
would you say you're sort of like a merchant of ideas, where you're kind of buying and selling
I like that one.
these use cases, or championing these initiatives because you believe in the big picture it's going to have this certain impact?
I think like I've been quite open. I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD. I have what I think is quite an interconnected brain. I can make associations very quickly. So I think where I fit in this role is I'm able to go to people, listen to them, and hear a problem and go, maybe there's something over here we can talk to somebody, maybe, and then get those people connected. Or also, yeah, just be involved in, start with the, GPT group that we had, and that kind of morphing out into more thinking about the AI governance and the projects and the proof of concepts that we want to do. But also being like a champion for the internet security and data privacy in our organization, making, I contacted them quite early on in my role, and got to know them. And, every project I've done, I've reached out to them to do the business impact that we have to do the, check the appetite for certain risks. But then also when I see other teams who maybe haven't done something in the right way, or maybe just put a page up and it's not behind the login, it's like, you need to please speak to that internet security team, get this all correctly set up. Really, if you want to drive this forward, then you need to have everything in place.
How do you determine what is the area where you can roam freely? How do you like set stakes in the ground and tie a rope around your waist?
One of the things in my first competency sheet for my role, before it was the software engineering leader part, was lead yourself and others into the unknown. Haven't found a boundary yet, and I think I feel genuinely lucky, and I also try and pass that on to people as well. I also, when I talk to people, it's when I'm interviewing people recently, I'm like, come and join us, because we're on a really good adventure here. There's a lot of fun here, and if you bring a lot of good ideas, if you have the right attitude, there's a lot to do here. There's a lot of fun projects to work on. So I think we're a very lucky area right now in what we're doing, that we're delivering in such a way that the pressure is there, but the pressure is also there to do the right job, because if we're delivering things for customers, we have to deliver not only the right information, but make sure we're delivering safety information, for example. If that's missing, that's not good. So there's lots of areas.
If you were to give some words of wisdom to somebody that has unbridled enthusiasm, and they kind of need to be grounded to still direct that towards productive means that support the business that is kind of paying the bills, what would you kind of give them as a food for thought?
Do a stand-up comedy course. Genuinely. Go do it. 8 weeks, you do a stand-up, you learn a lot about yourself, and you learn a lot about presenting, and you learn to be a bit more humble about, I think, also listening as well, because you have to listen to your other people and listen to them telling their stories and give them feedback and suggestions. And it's a very intimate environment. And I think I learned a lot from doing that. that helped me with this role, genuinely, and grounding myself. If you're on a certain path like this, actually, I'd get a coach, somebody who can maybe help you as well, and be a sounding board for stuff. But really look at what, if you have an opportunity to do it, look at what the business needs, or ask people in the business. A lot of times it feels like sometimes it's like tech and business like this, and actually, you should be sitting at the same table talking to each other, like, yeah, exactly like this. Because if you don't, then you're not building anything that the business can use. Yeah. I think, again, if I ever write the book on this, it'll be a chapter around the amount of money wasted, amount of money on your bill because a project wasted several million to 100 million on a failed billing system, or integration, or two companies merged for the shareholders, and had to integrate systems, and then now you have a huge bill because that project was a failure and makes things worse. It's like there's our industry is full of that, I think, because people don't talk to the business, and they don't also challenge the business. Like, just take the business's word for it.
You triggered one really good question. We've kind of painted this light where you're working in this very complex, still interconnected system with a multitude of arms and product lines, and there's so much going on. And we're talking about how, your work is integrating knowledge and kind of making that available and reusable and transportable, and augmenting the capabilities of people working inside and people learning or buying from IKEA. But, we're talking about these technical details, kind of esoteric terms. You're saying you have no boundaries, and you're saying you're wheeling and dealing and talking and integrating these things. How do you integrate with people to make to have a goodwill to build these
Be
connections?
myself, and don't get me wrong. A few years ago, even I would say maybe I was a bit of a dick. I've learned to grow up and listen to people and be empathetic to, and I think that's the key thing. Is I'm not I joined IKEA 2 years ago, so I'm not an expert in IKEA's business, but I am an expert in software engineering because that's my background, and I've built lots of things, and I have the pattern recognition there. So I think it's like when when you're talking to people, you don't dismiss them because they know what they're talking about as well. I think
They know their business. They know
sometimes from
their
the tech side, yeah, we have people who in the tech side who, because they're a technical expert, they think they know everything, and they actually then don't challenge business in the wrong way, and it's it can come across a bit bad. And I think that's where instead what you're really doing is listening, and then if you have to say no, like, explain why you have to say no, have good reasons, and also come with other suggestions. I think this is the thing is, you're not there to be a gatekeeper
dream
for
killer.
a dream killer, or a gatekeeper to a business doing their job. You're there
Right.
to help that part of the business do their job in an organization like this. Like I said earlier, I say, like, hashtag not a tech company, because we're not a tech company, but our area is very technical, so that's the key difference, I think, compared to a lot of other areas where even other companies that are maybe in the retail space are putting themselves out there as tech companies, or I mean, that was we work was a tech company, not a real estate agent company. It was like, no, we are a home furnishing retailer. We're also a big brand, and yeah, people look at us and go, "What are IKEA doing? We'll do that." So we have to do that, in the best way possible. And I think, yeah, the only way to do that is to talk to people. being what I would have previously labeled myself as an introvert, like I say,
I don't see it.
maybe it was the stand-up comedy course or something. It just awoke in me. It was like, yeah, I just learned to be a better communicator. But it also is maybe just, yeah, having done 20 years and worked my way up into different organizations, and then the last 2 or 3 being enterprise level. And so having to deal with stakeholders, having to deal with external companies, internal, managing up, managing down. Yeah, you learn all those things.
Well, I think we're at the time limit there. And are there any parting words? Any last thoughts?
Yeah, I think just on, kind of what you were alluding to earlier, which is there was a lot of words and there's a lot of complexity and things, but I think I see, this new paradigm that we're moving into, in some sense, I was a bit cynical about it, but I can't be cynical about it anymore. AI is a shift in how we work. It is a new form of industrial revolution in terms of data, in terms of data processing. I was playing with GPT, and I now have a GPT that can take any PDF file and split it into smaller chunks for me, so I can then use them to build GPTs because it doesn't like the big files. That would take me, I'd have to get the tools, and then maybe I get a process, but now I just have a GPT that can do it in like 10 seconds. It's, those are the things I can see us in the near future, like the App Store a little bit, finding those. There's going to be lots of fart apps, definitely going to be lots of fart apps in that store, but also there'll be some gems in there. And those are the things that we take forward, we improve upon, and hopefully, I think knowledge. I think for me, a big thing is knowledge sharing. That's the biggest area I'm working in right now, and hopefully these tools can enable it. But if you're in a business and you are looking at this, you also have to work with the business. Don't dismiss them. Also, they have no stupid questions because they're probably reading different blogs than you are.
Yeah,
Which are telling them,
there's so much knowledge being diffused and different perspectives that need to be cross-examined. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's definitely business focused things out there going, this is the new magic, and then so they're expecting magic. It's maybe not magic yet, but we can help them
Work towards
realize
that.
what it can do.